The morning started with promise. Sylvester Stallone, dressed in a sleek charcoal gray suit and his signature quiet smirk, was ushered into the brightly lit studio of Good Morning America. Scheduled to promote his upcoming streaming and a surprise film cameo, the segment was hyped as a celebration of a legendary career. George Stephanopoulos, always polished, was ready with his notes, and the crew moved swiftly through the opening pleasantries. The intro rolled with classic Rocky music, bringing nostalgic smiles to the staff. Stallone, always professional, gave his usual polite nods, hands clasped calmly, ready to navigate yet another press appearance. But behind the scenes, there were already rumblings. A producer had mentioned George wanted to touch on some of Stallone's more controversial moments, something the actor's team had strictly warned against. "Let's keep it legacy-focused," his publicist had said firmly. But George, feeling emboldened by recent rating surges from edgier interviews, decided to press forward anyway. Asterisk, as the segment began, everything appeared smooth. George opened with a light question about Stallone's impact on American masculinity through decades of cinema. Stallone responded with humor and grace, throwing in a few anecdotes about training in the snow for Rocky IV and the absurdity of 80s action sets. The banter was warm until George pivoted. "There's also been discussion," he said casually, "about how your earlier roles may have shaped or even glorified violence, and how that sits today in a world dealing with mass shootings and toxic masculinity." A beat of silence hung in the air. Stallone blinked once, leaned back slightly, and gave a half smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You want to go there?" he asked. George nodded, tone still mild, but unmistakably firm. Stallone's gaze hardened. "We're talking about movie characters, George. Fiction. That's like blaming Shakespeare for Hamlet being depressed." The studio laughed nervously, but George pressed again, this time citing modern critics who had linked Stallone's characters to a generation of disillusioned, angry men. "Do you take any responsibility?" he asked. Stallone's expression shifted from amusement to stone. Asterisk, what followed was uncomfortable and electric. "You know what's funny," Stallone began, voice steady but icy. "Every time I make a film about redemption or family, it's ignored. But when I wear gloves and throw a punch, suddenly I'm society's punching bag." George tried to interject, but Stallone raised a hand. "Let me finish. You sit here with your note cards, and you want to psychoanalyze Rambo like he's a threat to your studio's moral compass. But you weren't there when I got death threats for playing a misunderstood vet. You weren't there when real soldiers told me those films helped them survive." His voice had risen, but not into a shout. It was that low, threatening timbre that once shook villains on screen. The crew froze. George attempted a measured pivot. "We're not attacking your work," he began. "Feels like it," Stallone cut in. "Feels like you're trying to rewrite my legacy with buzzwords and think pieces." The tension was thick enough to slice. And then, in front of millions of live viewers, Stallone unhooked his microphone, stood up, and muttered, "I don't need this crap." Asterisk, the moment was explosive. A-list guests don't storm off network morning shows. The cameras, catching the tail end of his departure, quickly cut to commercial. Inside the studio, chaos erupted. Producers rushed to the back, scrambling to address the unfolding PR nightmare. Stephanopoulos looked momentarily stunned, then tried to smooth over the scene for viewers with a weak smile and a joke about passion. In Hollywood, but the damage was done. Within minutes, clips of Stallone walking off went viral. Twitter, now X, exploded with reactions ranging from outrage to admiration. #StalloneWalks trended within 20 minutes. Some praised his refusal to be baited, others accused him of being thin-skinned and outdated. Conservative commentators jumped to his defense, while left-leaning voices debated the implications of violence in media and celebrity accountability. The cultural divide turned a 7-minute interview into a national debate. Asterisk, backstage, Stallone's team went into overdrive. His publicist began coordinating damage control, while PR strategists prepared talking points. But Stallone himself remained quiet, seated in the back of a black SUV, staring out the tinted window. According to an assistant, he simply said, "They wanted a headline. I gave them one." George, meanwhile, met with ABC executives behind closed doors. Some felt he had overstepped, risking a valuable relationship with a Hollywood icon. Others praised him for not softballing tough questions. Internally, the network debated whether to release the full, uncut footage or edit the confrontation. Eventually, they opted for transparency, uploading the segment to YouTube with the title, "Sylvester Stallone Walks Off After Unexpected Tense Moment." The clip received over 10 million views in under 24 hours by the following morning. Stallone's walkout had been replayed on every major outlet. CNN looped the footage with panels debating whether celebrities should be held more accountable for their legacy. Fox News aired it under the Sharon, "Hollywood legend refuses to bow to woke media." The View dedicated nearly an entire episode to the fallout, with hosts split between admiration and concern. Joy Behar sarcastically asked if Stallone thought he was still in a boxing ring, while Whoopi Goldberg defended him, saying, "If you're going to bring someone on to celebrate their work, don't ambush them with a moral tribunal." Meanwhile, social media was a firestorm. Some accused Stallone of being unable to handle criticism, while others insisted George had crossed a professional line. In the center of it all, Stallone remained mostly silent. No tweets, no interviews, no reactive posts. Just an old PR blackout, but that silence only made the speculation louder. Anonymous insiders whispered to TMZ that Stallone had been furious backstage, while someone from the GMA crew leaked that George was visibly shaken after the cameras stopped rolling. 3 days after the walkout, Stallone finally broke his silence. In a short, sharply worded Instagram video shot in his home gym, he addressed the incident head-on. "Look, I've been doing this for 50 years, he said, hands clasped. "No notes. I've sat on hundreds of couches, answered every kind of question. But there's a line between inquiry and indictment. I'm not ashamed of the characters I've played. They weren't saints, they were survivors. If that makes people uncomfortable now, maybe that says more about the world than it does about me." The video went viral instantly, gaining millions of views and support from fans and industry veterans alike. Arnold Schwarzenegger left a simple comment: "Respect." Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson reposted it with fire emojis and the words, "Legend, period." Even lesser-known actors from Stallone's past projects chimed in with support. Overnight, the narrative began to shift. No longer was it just about an awkward interview, it became a debate about the shifting boundaries between journalism and gotcha tactics, between accountability and respect. Asterisk, behind closed doors, GMA was on damage control. George Stephanopoulos, while maintaining a public air of professionalism, was reportedly growing increasingly frustrated. He believed the backlash was disproportionate. "I asked a real question," he told a colleague. "Just because the guy didn't like it doesn't make it an attack." But privately, even he admitted to friends that perhaps the tone had been misjudged. ABC's internal polling showed viewer sentiment leaning against the network. Many felt Stallone had been ambushed. Ratings for the next few days dipped slightly. Sponsors sent cautious emails. One prominent advertiser postponed their segment indefinitely. Meanwhile, Stallone was approached by multiple platforms to tell his side more in-depth, long-form podcasts, high-profile magazine features, even a Netflix offer for a short docuseries reflecting on the moment. He declined all. Instead, he booked a single appearance on a relatively small YouTube interview channel known for respectful, deep conversations with iconic figures. That appearance, when it aired a week later, changed everything again. Asterisk, in the dim, relaxed lighting of the studio, Stallone spoke for nearly an hour, unpacking not only the GMA walkout, but his entire perspective on fame, legacy, and what he called the absurd idea that fiction corrupts reality. He admitted he'd been hurt by the suggestion that his life's work had done harm. "I wrote those stories for the forgotten," he said. "For the underdogs, the lost, the angry kids like I once was. If someone chooses to pick up a gun after watching a movie, maybe we need to talk about what's missing in that person's life, not what's playing on a screen." The interview was moving raw and more effective than any press conference. Suddenly, the narrative tilted. Commentators who had previously criticized him began to revise their takes. Op-eds began to appear with titles like "Stallone, Misunderstood," and "The Real Message Behind Rambo and Rocky." Meanwhile, George remained quiet, his team advising him not to pour gasoline on the cooling flames. ABC scheduled a fluffier lineup for the following week, steering clear of high-profile confrontations